She wasn't supposed to survive the night. By sunrise, Melissa was supposed to be on a plane she'd never come back from, sold, sealed, and forgotten like she never mattered. Instead, she was on her knees in the most dangerous building in Seoul. Security cameras tracked her every move as she crawled across the marble floor, blood on her palms, breath shaking, knowing that if the man behind the desk said no, she was done. Her fiancé had already made his choice. He sold her. Now this man owned the debt, owned her fate. The Korean Mafia Boss finally stopped signing papers and looked up, not angry, not shocked, just cold. "Begging won't save you," he said calmly. Melissa swallowed, forcing the words out anyway. "Then tell me what will." For a moment, the room felt like it stopped breathing, because instead of ordering her dragged out, instead of calling the men waiting outside, the most feared man in Seoul stood up, and everything about the way he looked at her said one thing. Her life was about to change, for better or for far worse. If you're watching this right now, drop your city or country in the comments so I know where you're listening from. I actually read them. And if you're into intense stories with danger, power, and unexpected love, hit subscribe now, because what happens next only gets darker. All right. Let me tell you how she ended up on her knees in that office. She shouldn't be here. Crawling on her knees across icy floors like some kind of animal. But Melissa had run out of options 3 days ago. The Korean man sitting behind that massive desk hadn't even looked up yet, just kept signing papers like she was invisible, and maybe that was worse than being turned away. If you're already hooked, ensure you like, subscribe, and stay with me till the end. Melissa's knees burned. She'd walked 17 blocks to get to this building in downtown Seoul, past the guards who'd smirked at her desperation, up the elevator that felt like it was judging her too, and now here she was, begging. Her mama would have been so ashamed, probably, but her mama wasn't the one whose fiancé had sold her off like property to pay gambling debts. "Please," she whispered, hating how her voice shook. "I know you don't know me, but Weston, he said you own the debt now and I just need your fiancé." The man finally spoke, still not looking up, his accent thick but his English perfect. "Sold you for 30 million won. That's roughly 23,000 American dollars. He set down his pen, slow and deliberate. "Do you know what kind of man does that?" Melissa's throat felt tight. A desperate one. No. Now he looked up, and Melissa's whole body went still because his eyes were cold. Not angry, just empty in a way that made her skin prickle. A coward. Desperate men find other ways. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp features and hair styled back neat and perfect. Everything about him screamed control, from the way he sat to the way he watched her like she was a problem he was calculating how to solve. "I can work," Melissa said quickly. "I can pay you back. I can't go to the people Weston sold me to. Please, I'll do anything legal. I'll clean. Stand up." She blinked. "What?" "I said stand up." His voice hadn't raised, but something in it made her scramble to her feet anyway, even though her legs felt shaky. "I don't do business with people on their knees. It's undignified." Melissa stood there, fighting the urge to wrap her arms around herself. She was wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago because she'd been sleeping in a subway station, too scared to go back to the apartment she'd shared with Weston. Her hair was a mess, her lip was split from where one of the debt collectors had hit her before she'd run, and she probably smelled terrible. The man studied her for a long moment. "My name is Kang Dae-Wang. You're in my office because you have information I want." "Information?" Melissa's mind raced. "I don't know anything, I swear. Weston never told me about his gambling or—" "Not about him." Dae-Wang stood up, moving around the desk with footsteps that didn't make a sound. "About you? Why would an American woman be in Seoul engaged to a man like Weston Chen?" We met at university, in California. He said he had a job opportunity here, and She trailed off because it sounded so stupid now. I followed him. I thought we were building a life. Instead, he built a debt. Dae-Wang stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. And now you're here. Do you have family in America? My grandma. She's sick, though, and she doesn't have money for... Melissa stopped, shaking her head. Why does that matter? Because I'm deciding whether to help you or not. Hope flared so sharp in her chest it actually hurt. You'd help me? Really? Maybe. Probably depends on whether you're honest with me. He tilted his head slightly. The men Weston sold you to. They're not just debt collectors. They run a trafficking ring. If I hadn't bought your contract first, you'd be on a boat to somewhere much worse than here right now. Melissa's legs actually wobbled. She'd known it was bad, but hearing it said out loud like that. So here's what's going to happen, Dae-Wang continued, his voice still that same even tone. You're going to stay in a safe location I provide. You're going to work for me. Nothing illegal, just administrative tasks, and in exchange, your debt gets paid off over time and Weston never touches you again. Why? The word burst out before she could stop it. Why would you do that? For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. Because I hate men who sell people, and because you crawled through my building on your knees instead of giving up, which means you're a survivor. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling someone to take you to a hotel. You'll shower, eat, sleep. Tomorrow we'll discuss the details. I don't understand. Melissa felt tears burning her eyes. You don't even know me. No, Dae-Wang agreed, but I know Weston Chen, and anyone he'd do this to is someone who deserves better. The hotel was nice. Like, too nice. Melissa stood in the bathroom staring at herself in the mirror, at the split lip and the bruise forming on her cheekbone, at eyes that looked too old for her 26 years. The woman who'd brought her here, a stern-faced lady named Song-hee, had left clothes on the bed. Real clothes, not fancy but clean and new and in her size somehow. She showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing away days of fear and dirt and shame. When she finally came out, there was food waiting. Korean dishes she didn't recognize, but that smelled incredible. And she ate until her stomach hurt because she couldn't remember the last real meal she'd had. Sleep came hard, full of dreams about Weston's face when he'd told her what he'd done, how he'd cried and said he had no choice, that they'd kill him if he didn't pay, that she'd understand eventually, how she'd screamed at him that she'd never understand, that he was supposed to love her, protect her, and instead She woke up gasping, tangled in sheets that were softer than anything she'd ever slept on, and it took her a full minute to remember where she was. Safe. For now, at least. Because of a man who had every reason to turn her away, but hadn't. The next morning, Song-hee returned with more clothes and a message. Boss wants to see you at noon. I'll take you. Is he always like that? Melissa asked as she got dressed. So, cold? Song-hee's expression didn't change. Boss is careful, has to be in his line of work, but he's fair, which is more than most can say. The office looked different in daylight, less intimidating somehow. Dae-Wang was at his desk again, but this time he gestured to the chair across from him, immediately. Sit. We need to establish terms. Melissa sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Okay. You'll work as my administrative assistant, filing, organizing, scheduling meetings, boring tasks mostly. Pay is standard, but your housing is covered and meals are provided. The debt gets deducted monthly until it's cleared. How long will that take? At the standard rate? 5 years, maybe 6? Melissa's heart sank. 6 years. But still, it was better than the alternative. So much better. And Weston? Won't be a problem. Dae-Wang's eyes went hard. I've made it very clear what happens if he comes near you. He's leaving Seoul by the end of the week. Just like that? Just like that. He slid a paper across the desk. This is a contract. Read it carefully. If you sign, you're bound to the terms, but so am I. I don't break contracts." Melissa read slowly, sounding out the legal terms in her head. It was all exactly what he'd said. Nothing hidden, nothing suspicious. At the bottom was a clause that made her pause. "What's this part about protection detail? You'll have a guard with you for the first few months, until we're certain Weston's associates aren't going to try anything." "A guard? Like a bodyguard?" "Yes." That seems like a lot for an administrative assistant. Dae-Wang leaned back in his chair. "You're not just an administrative assistant. You're someone I'm choosing to protect, which means you represent me now. If something happens to you, it makes me look weak. I don't do weak." There was logic in that, probably, even if it made her feel strange, like she mattered in some calculated way that wasn't quite personal, but wasn't quite business either. She signed. The apartment Dae-Wang set her up in was small but nice, in a building with security cameras and a doorman who nodded at her like she belonged there. Melissa spent the first week jumping at every sound, waiting for something to go wrong, for this to turn into another nightmare. But nothing happened. She went to the office, filed papers, learned the computer system, and slowly started to breathe again. Her bodyguard was a guy named Kang Dae, built like a wall and about as talkative. He mostly just stood around looking intimidating, which was fine because Melissa didn't feel much like talking anyway. She was too busy trying to figure out Kang Dae-Wang. He was confusing. Some days he barely looked at her, just gave instructions through Song-hee and stayed locked in his private office. Other days he'd appear out of nowhere, asking if she'd eaten lunch or if the apartment was comfortable or if she needed anything. The questions always felt awkward, like he was reading from a script of how to be considerate, but didn't quite understand why. "You don't have to do that," Melissa said one afternoon when he'd shown up with coffee. Not fancy coffee, just regular stuff from the shop downstairs, but still. "I'm fine." "You didn't eat breakfast." He set the cup on her desk. "I checked the kitchen logs." "You check that? Why?" He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "People work better when they're fed. It's practical." "Right, practical." She took the coffee anyway because it smelled good, and she was hungry. "Thank you." Something shifted in his expression, too quick to name. "You're welcome." It became a pattern. Small things that didn't mean anything except they kind of did. He'd remember she didn't like spicy food and order mild versions during office lunches. He'd notice when she was struggling with the Korean on some of the files and bring in translation software without being asked. Once, when she'd been crying in the bathroom because a song reminded her of her grandma, he'd somehow known and had given her the rest of the day off. "How did you know?" she'd asked Song-hee. "Boss notices things. Always has." "But why does he care?" Song-hee had given her a long look. "Maybe you should ask him that yourself." But Melissa didn't ask because she was scared of the answer, whatever it might be. Instead, she focused on her work, on learning Korean phrases, on building something that felt like a routine. Kang Dae took her to the market on weekends and waited patiently while she picked out vegetables she barely knew how to cook. Song-hee taught her how to use chopsticks properly and which subway lines went where. Slowly, Seoul started feeling less foreign. 2 months in, everything changed. Melissa was working late, finishing up a filing project that had gotten behind. Most of the office was empty, just her and a few security guards downstairs. She didn't hear anyone approach, didn't know anything was wrong until a hand grabbed her shoulder and spun her around. "Weston." "Baby, please," he said, and he looked terrible. Thin and strung out with eyes that couldn't focus. "Please, you have to help me. They're going to kill me if I don't pay them back and get away from me." Melissa tried to pull free, but his grip was too tight. "How did you even get in here?" "I know people. I always know people. Listen, if you could just ask Kang for more money, just a little more, I can—" "No." The word came out harder than she'd ever said anything. "You sold me, Weston. You don't get to ask me for anything ever again." It wasn't like that. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Mr. Pak. They both froze. Dae-Wang stood in the doorway, and his voice was quiet, but something about it made the air feel dangerous. You were told to leave Seoul. I just needed to talk to her just for a minute. And now you're leaving. Dae-Wang crossed the room in a few strides, his hand closing on Weston's wrist. Let go of her. Weston's fingers opened immediately. He stumbled back, holding his wrist like it hurt. She's my fiancé. I have a right. You have nothing. Now there was an edge in Dae-Wang's voice, sharp enough to cut. No rights, no claims, no excuses. You made your choice when you sold her. Now I'm making mine. What are you going to do? Weston's voice went high and panicky. You can't just... I can do whatever I want, but since Melissa is watching, I'll be civilized. Dae-Wang pulled out his phone, pressed one button. Security? We have a trespasser in my office. Remove him and make sure he understands what happens if he comes back. 2 guards appeared within seconds. They weren't rough, exactly, but they weren't gentle either as they hauled Weston toward the door. He was still babbling excuses, promises, apologies, all of it washing over Melissa like meaningless noise. The door closed. Silence. Are you hurt? Dae-Wang asked, his eyes scanning her face, her arms looking for damage. No, just shaken up, I guess. Melissa rubbed her shoulder where Weston had grabbed her. It didn't really hurt, but the memory of his touch felt gross. Thank you. Again, I keep having to thank you. You don't owe me thanks for basic human decency. Most people wouldn't call protecting me basic human decency. He studied her for a moment, then did something unexpected. He pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. My mother was sold when I was young. Not by a fiancé, by her own family. They needed money and she was expendable, I guess. Melissa sat slowly, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. What happened to her? Someone bought her contract, a businessman who needed a housekeeper. He was fair, treated her well, and eventually helped her get free. Dae-Wang's jaw tightened. But the fact that she needed to be bought at all, that her own family would do that, it shaped a lot of how I see the world. Is that why you helped me? Partly, but also because you reminded me that there are still people worth protecting. He stood up, shoulders straightening like he was putting armor back on. Go home, rest. Kwon Jae will take you. What about you? I have things to handle. His expression went flat. Again, all business. Weston won't bother you again, I'm making sure of it. Melissa didn't ask what that meant. Didn't want to know, probably. Instead, she gathered her things and let Kwon Jae escort her home, her mind spinning with everything Dae-Wang had said, the glimpse he'd given her into why he was the way he was. Careful and controlled, but with something fierce underneath. That night, she dreamed about his mother, about all the women who'd been sold like property, and when she woke up, she felt different somehow, less like a victim and more like someone who'd survived something terrible. The office felt lighter after that. Weston was gone. Really gone, Song-hee confirmed, on a plane to Shanghai with very clear instructions never to return. The debt collectors who'd bought her original contract had mysteriously dropped their interest, which Melissa suspected had less to do with mercy and more to do with Dae-Wang, making it not worth their while. You paid them off, didn't you? She asked him one day. That's not your concern. It is if it means my debt to you is bigger now. He looked at her, really looked, and something flickered in his eyes. Your debt hasn't changed. What I do with my money is my business. That doesn't seem fair. Life isn't fair, but I can be. It was such a strange thing to say, so matter-of-fact, like he'd long ago accepted that the world was broken and decided to be one of the few things in it that worked right. Spring came to Seoul in bursts of pink cherry blossoms that made the whole city look like something from a painting. Melissa had been working for Dae-Wang for 4 months now, and somewhere along the way, her life had started to feel almost normal. She had friends at the office, a favorite restaurant near her apartment, a Korean drama she was obsessed with that Song-hee kept recommending episodes of, and she had Dae-Wang, who was, well, she didn't quite know what he was. Boss, protector, friend maybe? He'd started eating lunch with her sometimes, usually in his office where he'd work through the meal, but would occasionally look up and ask her questions about her grandma, about what she missed from America, about whether she liked Seoul. "It's growing on me," Melissa admitted one afternoon, picking at her bibimbap. "I never thought I'd say that after everything, but it is. Good." He set down his pen. "You seem happier, less frightened." "I was really scared for a while." She hadn't meant to say it, but the words came out anyway. Like, constantly terrified that something would go wrong, that you'd change your mind about helping me, or Weston would come back, or I'd mess up at work and I wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Change my mind. You could mess up every task I give you, and I still wouldn't send you back to that situation. His voice was firm. "I don't rescue people halfway. It's all or nothing." Melissa felt her throat get tight. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve it." "You don't know that. You don't really know me." "I know enough." He hesitated, his fingers drumming once on the desk. "You work hard. You're kind to the staff. You haven't complained once about the situation, even though you have every right to. And you make the office feel less cold." The office or you? The question hung there between them. Dae-Wang's expression shifted, something almost vulnerable crossing his face before he controlled it. Both, maybe. Before Melissa could figure out how to respond to that, Song-hee knocked and stuck her head in. "Boss, the meeting with the investors got moved up. They're here now." "I'll be right there." Dae-Wang stood, smoothing his tie. He paused at the door, glancing back at Melissa. "We should talk more. Later." But later didn't come that day, or the next, because everything got busy. Some kind of business deal that had Dae-Wang working 16-hour days and looking exhausted in a way Melissa had never seen. She started staying late, too, not because she had to, but because she wanted to help. Organizing his files, making sure he ate something, leaving coffee on his desk with little notes that said things like, "Drink this, or I'm telling Song-hee on you." On the third night, she found him asleep at his desk, his head pillowed on his arms. He looked younger like this, less guarded. She grabbed the blanket from the office couch and draped it over his shoulders carefully, trying not to wake him. His hand shot out, catching her wrist. "Melissa." "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I was just... What time is it?" "Almost midnight. You fell asleep." He sat up slowly, the blanket sliding off. "You're still here." "Somebody has to make sure you don't work yourself to death." She perched on the edge of his desk. "When's the last time you slept in an actual bed?" "Tuesday, I think." "It's Thursday." "Is it?" He rubbed his face, looking disoriented. "The days are blurring together." "Then go home. The work will still be here. Tomorrow." "Can't. The deal closes Friday and there's still too much to... Dae-Wang." She said his name firmly, the way he sometimes said hers when she was being stubborn. "You told me once that people work better when they're taken care of. Don't you think that applies to you too?" He stared at her, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, he said, "No one's ever worried about me before." "Well, I am, so deal with it." A smile, small but real, tugged at his mouth. "Bossy." "Learned from the best." She stood up. "Come on, I'm calling you a car and you're going to your apartment and sleeping for at least 6 hours. Non-negotiable." "And if I refuse?" "Then I'm calling Song-hee and telling her you're being difficult. She scares you more than I do." He actually laughed at that, soft and surprised. Fair point. The car arrived 10 minutes later. Dae-Wang gathered his things slowly, like he wasn't quite sure this was happening. At the door, he paused, looking back at her. "Thank you for caring. You cared about me first." Melissa shrugged, trying to make it casual even though her heart was doing weird things. "I'm just returning the favor." "It's not a favor if it's genuine." "Then I guess it's genuine." Something passed between them, heavier than friendship but undefined. Then he was gone, and Melissa was alone in the office, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart wouldn't slow down. The deal closed. Friday afternoon, Dae-Wang came out of the meeting looking relieved and exhausted in equal measure, and the whole office basically erupted in celebration. Someone ordered pizza, which was weird but nice, and for a few hours everyone just relaxed and talked and laughed. "You did this," Song-hee said, appearing at Melissa's elbow. "Got him to rest. Deal wouldn't have gone through if he'd burned out." "I just gave him a blanket." "You did more than that." Song-hee smiled, which was rare. "He listens to you. Hasn't listened to anyone in years." "Why not?" "Because most people want something from him. Money, power, connections. But you just want him to sleep and eat and be okay." She shook her head. "That's dangerous for a man like him." "Dangerous how?" "Because it makes him care. And caring makes you vulnerable." Melissa turned that over in her mind, watching Dae-Wang across the room as he talked with investors. He looked happy, or as close to it as she'd ever seen him. And when his eyes found hers through the crowd, when he smiled just slightly like they were sharing a secret, she thought maybe Song-hee was right. Maybe this was dangerous, but she didn't want to stop. A week later, Dae-Wang asked her to dinner. Not at the office, at an actual restaurant. "It's to celebrate the deal," he said quickly, like he needed an excuse, "and to thank you for your help." "You don't have to thank me with dinner. I want to." He hesitated. "Unless you'd rather not." "No, I'd like that, actually." The restaurant was small and quiet, tucked away in a neighborhood Melissa had never been to. They sat by a window overlooking a garden full of lanterns, and for the first time it felt less like boss and employee and more like something else. "Tell me about your grandma," Dae-Wang said after they'd ordered. "You talk about her sometimes, but I've never heard the whole story." So Melissa told him about growing up in her grandma's house in Atlanta after her parents died, about learning to cook collard greens and cornbread, about church on Sundays, and the way her grandma would hum old gospel songs while she cleaned, about how when Melissa had told her she was moving to Seoul with Weston, her grandma had looked sad, but said she understood wanting to build something with someone you loved. "She was wrong, though," Melissa said softly, "about Weston being someone worth building with. She wasn't wrong about you deserving love, just wrong about him being capable of giving it." Melissa looked up, surprised. "That's a really specific distinction." "It's an important one." Dae-Wang's fingers traced the rim of his water glass. "You're easy to love, Melissa. Weston was just too broken to do it right." Her breath caught. "You think I'm easy to love?" "I think you're kind and strong and you make people want to be better." He met her eyes. "So yes, easy to love." The weight of those words settled over the table. Neither of them moved to address it directly, but something had shifted. The conversation flowed easier after that, touching on everything and nothing. His favorite music, her terrible attempts at learning Korean, the weird dreams they both had sometimes. When dessert came, some kind of sweet rice cake that Melissa couldn't pronounce, Dae-Wang did something unexpected. He reached across the table and gently wiped a bit of powdered sugar from the corner of her mouth with his thumb. "You had something," he said, but his hand lingered a second too long. "Thanks." Melissa's voice came out whisper soft. They stayed until the restaurant was closing, neither wanting the night to end. When Dae-Wang dropped her off at her apartment, he walked her to the door even though Kwon Jae was right there. "I had a really nice time," Melissa said. Me too. He shoved his hands in his pockets, looking uncertain in a way that made him seem younger. Maybe we could do it again sometime if you want. I'd like that. Good. He smiled, and it was warm. The kind of smile that reached his eyes. Good night, Melissa. Good night. She watched him walk away, her heart doing complicated things, and thought maybe this was what healing felt like. Spring turned to summer, humid and hot in a way that made Seoul feel tropical. Melissa bought a fan for her apartment and learned to love patbingsu, the shaved ice dessert Dae-Wang introduced her to on their third date, because that's what they were now, dates. Not labeled as such exactly, but definitely not business dinners, either. He took her to a bookstore where everything was in Korean, but he patiently translated the covers she was interested in. They went to a night market and tried every food stall, laughing when she couldn't handle the spice level, and he had to order her milk. Once they just walked along the Han River at sunset, not really talking, just being together in a way that felt comfortable and new at the same time. My debt is half paid off, Melissa mentioned one evening. They were in his office after hours, her organizing files while he finished paperwork. Song-hee showed me the numbers. If I keep at this rate, I'll be clear in 2.5 more years. Dae-Wang's pen stopped moving. Is that what you want? To pay it off and leave? I didn't say leave, but you could. Once the debt is clear, you're free to go anywhere. Melissa set down the folder she was holding. Do you want me to leave? No. The word came out hard and immediate. No, I don't want that at all. Then why does it sound like you're trying to convince yourself I will? He set down his pen, turning to face her fully. Because people don't stay with me, Melissa. They work for me. They're loyal to a point, but they don't stay. Not when they have other options. Maybe I don't want other options. You should want them. You should want to go back to America, see your grandma, build a life that doesn't involve working for someone who what? Someone who saved me? Someone who's been nothing but good to me for 6 months? She crossed her arms. You're not my prison, Dae-Wang. You're the person who set me free. There's a difference. He looked at her like she'd said something revolutionary, his expression cycling through surprise and confusion, and something that might have been hope. You really mean that? Yeah, I do. She moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk the way she did sometimes. I like my life here. I like my job. I like this city. She trailed off suddenly, nervous. Like what? You. The word came out smaller than she meant it to. I like you. A lot. And I know that's complicated because you're technically my boss and I owe you money and there's this whole power dynamic thing, but I can't help it. You make me feel safe and seen and like I matter as more than just someone who needs protection. Dae-Wang stood slowly, moving to stand in front of her, close enough that she could see the exact shade of brown in his eyes, the small scar on his chin she'd never asked about. You do matter. More than you should, probably. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. His hand came up, hesitating near her face before finally touching her cheek. I'm not good at this, at being open or vulnerable or whatever it is people do when they care about someone. You're doing fine so far. I don't want to mess this up, mess US up, whatever we are. Then don't. Melissa leaned into his touch. Just be honest with me. That's all I need. I think about you constantly, he admitted, his voice rough. When I'm in meetings, when I'm trying to sleep, when I'm supposed to be focused on work, you're always there in my head, making me want things I thought I'd given up on. What kind of things? Normal things. Coming home to someone who's happy to see me, sharing meals that aren't business related, having someone who knows the worst parts of me and stays anyway. He cupped her face with both hands now, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. You make me want to be the kind of man who deserves those things. You already are that man. Melissa's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heartbeat under her palms. You've been that man since you let me stand up from my knees and treated me like a person instead of property. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. almost a sob. "How are you real?" "I could ask you the same thing." They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air, not moving closer, but not pulling away either, just existing in this moment of perfect honesty. "I want to do this right," Dae-Wang said eventually. "Want to take you on real dates, not just dinners after work. Want to meet your grandma someday if she'll let me. Want to figure out what this is between us without the debt hanging over it. So let's do that." Melissa pulled back just enough to see his face. "Let's figure it out together." He nodded, something settling in his expression. "Together. I like the sound of that." The next morning, Melissa woke up to her phone ringing. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Melissa Pack? It's Melissa Clark, actually. I never took his name." "My apologies. This is Dr. Lee from Seoul National Hospital. You're listed as an emergency contact for Weston Pack." Melissa's stomach dropped. What happened? "He was brought in last night with injuries from an assault. He's stable now, but he's been asking for you." "I'm not going to see him." "I understand. However, he claims he has information about a threat against you. The police would like you to come in and hear what he has to say if you're willing." Melissa closed her eyes. Of course Weston couldn't just disappear quietly. "Fine, I'll be there in an hour." She called Dae-Wang immediately. He answered on the first ring, voice alert despite the early hour. "What's wrong?" "Weston is in the hospital. Someone beat him up and now he's claiming he has information about a threat against me." She was already pulling on clothes. "The police want me to come in." "Don't go alone. I'm sending Kang Dae and I'll meet you there." "You don't have to." "Melissa." His voice went firm. "You're not doing this alone. Not anymore." The hospital was sterile and too bright. Weston looked terrible, one eye swollen shut and his arm in a sling. When Melissa walked in with Kang Dae and Dae-Wang flanking her, his good eye went wide. "You brought him? He's here because I want him. Here." Melissa crossed her arms. "What's this about a threat?" Weston glanced at the police officer in the corner, then back at Melissa. "The guys who beat me up, they were asking about you, about where you live now, who you work for. I didn't tell them anything, I swear, but they know you're in Seoul and they're looking." "Who are they?" "The original debt collectors, the ones who were going to, before Kang bought your contract." Weston's voice shook. "They're angry about losing the money. They think if they can get to you, they can force him to pay more." Dae-Wang stepped forward, his presence making the room feel smaller. "Names. I need names." "I don't know names, man. They just came at me in an alley and started asking questions and descriptions then. Anything useful." Weston described them, halting and scared, while the police officer took notes. When he was done, Dae-Wang pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking rapid Korean that Melissa couldn't follow. He was still on the phone when he gestured for her and Kang Dae to follow him out. In the hallway, he finished his call and turned to Melissa. "I'm moving you to a secure location. Tonight." "Is that really necessary?" "Yes." No room for argument in his voice. "These men are dangerous, and they've already proven they're willing to use force. I'm not taking chances with your safety." "What about my job? My apartment?" "Both will be there when it's safe. Right now, you're going somewhere they can't find you." "Where?" He hesitated, then said, "My home. It's the most secure place I have." Dae-Wang's home was not what Melissa expected. Instead of some giant mansion, it was a modern apartment in a secure building with amazing views of the city. Simple furniture, clean lines, everything organized but not cold. There were books on the shelves, actual books, and photos on the wall of people she assumed were his family. "You can take the guest room," he said, showing her down a hallway. "It has its own bathroom, and I've had Song-hee bring over some of your things from your apartment." "This is a lot." Melissa turned to face him. "Having me here in your space. It's necessary." "Is it just necessary, or do you want me here?" His jaw tightened. "Both. Is that a problem?" "No." She softened. I just want to make sure we're being honest about what this is. This is me protecting someone I care about, someone who's become important to me in ways I didn't plan on. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the usual perfect style. And yes, part of me is glad I have an excuse to have you closer. Does that make me selfish? It makes you human. Melissa reached out, taking his hand. We'll figure this out, the threat and us and all of it. He squeezed her fingers. I'm not used to having an us. Good thing I'm patient. The first few days were strange. They moved around each other carefully, hyper-aware of the new intimacy of sharing space. Dae-Wang made breakfast, which surprised her until she tasted it and realized he was actually a good cook. They ate together, talking about nothing important, and it felt weirdly domestic in a way that made Melissa's chest ache. My grandma would like you, she said one morning over eggs. Yeah? She always said you can tell a lot about a man by how he treats people who can't do anything for him. You're good that way. I'm really not. He set down his coffee. I've done things, Melissa. In business, in the way I've handled rivals. I'm not some hero. I didn't say you were a hero. I said you're good. There's a difference. She met his eyes. You're good to me. That's what matters. He looked at her for a long moment. You see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. Maybe you deserve it more than you think. The threat investigation took 2 weeks. Dae-Wang's security team worked with the police to track down the men who'd attacked Weston, and eventually they found them. Not through violence, but through careful pressure and strategic offers that made cooperation more appealing than resistance. The men were deported, their operation shut down, and the threat neutralized. It's over, Dae-Wang told Melissa one evening. You can go back to your apartment whenever you want. And if I don't want to? Not yet, at least? He went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying I like being here. With you. And unless you're sick of me, maybe I could stay a little longer. I'm not sick of you. His voice was rough. I'm the opposite of sick of you. They fell into a new routine. Melissa kept her apartment but stayed at Dae-Wang's place most nights. They'd cook together, her teaching him her grandma's recipes while he showed her Korean dishes his mother used to make. They'd watch movies with subtitles, curl up on opposite ends of the couch that somehow became the same end by the time the credits rolled. One night, about a month after she'd moved in, Dae-Wang came home with a package. This is for you. Inside was a phone. New, expensive, already set up. Dae-Wang, I have a phone. This one has international calling. Unlimited. He wouldn't quite meet her eyes. I thought you might want to call your grandma more often. Talk to her without worrying about the cost. Melissa felt tears burn her throat. You got me a phone so I could call my grandma? You miss her, I can tell, and she should hear your voice, know you're okay. He shifted his weight. Family is important, even when they're far away. She set the phone down carefully and moved to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He stiffened for just a second before his arms came around her, holding her close. Thank you, she whispered against his chest, for this and for everything, for seeing me. You're impossible not to see. His hand came up to stroke her hair. You light up every room you're in. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, and Melissa thought this was what safety felt like. Not just physical protection, but emotional refuge, the knowledge that someone had your back, your heart, your best interests always in mind. That weekend, Dae-Wang took her to Namsan Tower. They rode the cable car up, watched the city spread out below them, and walked among the love locks that couples had attached to the fences. It's tacky, Dae-Wang said, but he was smiling. Everyone knows it's tacky. Yeah, but it's sweet too. Melissa read some of the messages written on the locks. Promises of forever, declarations of love, inside jokes that only made sense to the people who wrote them. People wanting to leave a mark, prove their love existed here. Do you want to leave one? She looked at him, surprised. Do you? He pulled a lock from his pocket, already engraved with their initials. I had it made, but only if you want to. Melissa took it, running her fingers over the metal. IHC plus KDJ, simple and perfect. Where did you even have this made? I know a guy. He produced a marker. You should write something on it. She thought for a minute, then wrote carefully, You taught me what safety feels like. When she showed him, his eyes got bright. He took the marker, adding underneath, You taught me what home feels like. They locked it to the fence together, their hands overlapping on the metal. It clicked into place and Dae-Wang threw the key over the edge, watching it disappear into the trees below. No going back now, he said softly. Good. Melissa leaned into him. I don't want to go back, only forward. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. I love you. I should probably say it more romantic with better timing, but I can't keep it in anymore. I love you, Melissa. Completely, and maybe not perfectly, but wholly. I love you too. The words felt easy, natural. I think I have for a while now. He smiled and it transformed his whole face. Yeah? Yeah, she laughed. You're not very subtle when you care about someone, you know. The coffee, the phone, the way you make sure I eat breakfast. It's all very obvious. I'll try to be more mysterious. Please don't. I like you obvious. They stayed at the tower until sunset, watching the city lights come on one by one. When they finally headed home, Dae-Wang held her hand the whole way, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. That night, curled up on his couch with her head on his shoulder, Melissa called her grandma. She told her everything. About Weston's betrayal, about Dae-Wang's rescue, about falling in love in a city she'd never planned to call home. He sounds good for you, baby, her grandma said, her voice warm through the phone. Real good. He is, Grandma. He really is. Then hold on to him. Good men are rare. After the call, Melissa found Dae-Wang in the kitchen making tea. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her face to his back. My grandma wants to meet you someday. I'd like that. He turned in her arms. Maybe we could. Visit her. When you're ready. You'd come with me to America. I'd follow you anywhere, Melissa. Haven't you figured that out yet? She had, actually, but hearing him say it still made her heart do that complicated flip thing. I'm really glad Weston sold me to you instead of those other guys. It was a dark thing to say, probably inappropriate, but Dae-Wang understood. He always understood. I'm glad too, and I'm sorry it happened, but I'm not sorry where we ended up. Me neither. They stood in the kitchen, swaying slightly to music only they could hear, and Melissa thought about the girl who'd crawled across a marble floor 6 months ago. How broken she'd been, how terrified. She hardly recognized that girl now. This version of her was stronger, happier, loved in ways that felt real and solid. What are you thinking about? Dae-Wang asked, reading her expression. How far I've come. How far we've come. It's been a journey. The best kind, though. She pulled back to look at him. The kind that changes you for the better. You changed me, he said simply. Made me believe in things I'd stopped hoping for. What kind of things? Partnership, trust, the possibility that someone could know all my flaws and love me anyway. He tucked her hair behind her ear. You make me want to be better. Not because you demand it, but because you make me believe I can be. You're already so much better than you think. Then I'm lucky you see me that way. A year after Melissa first crawled into Dae-Wang's office, they threw a party. Not a big one, just close friends and colleagues at a restaurant Dae-Wang had rented out for the evening. Song-hee was there, smiling more than usual. Kwon-jae brought his wife, who Melissa had never even known existed. The whole office showed up, everyone who'd watched their relationship develop from careful distance to obvious partnership. Speech! Someone called out, and everyone started chanting. Dae-Wang stood reluctantly, pulling Melissa up with him. I'm not good at speeches. That's never stopped you before, Song-hee called out, which got a laugh. He took a breath. A year ago, someone walked into my office desperate and afraid. She'd been betrayed by someone she trusted, sold like property, and had every reason to give up. But she didn't. She fought. She survived. And somehow, impossibly, she decided I was worth loving. Melissa felt her eyes get hot. Dae-Wang, I don't deserve her, he continued. But I'm selfish enough to keep her anyway, to build a life with her that's better than anything I imagined possible. He turned to face her fully. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Melissa. Maybe more. That's not true. It is, though. He took her hands. You taught me what it means to be vulnerable, to trust someone completely, to believe that love doesn't have to hurt. He reached into his pocket, and Melissa's heart stopped. So I'm asking you, here in front of everyone who matters, if you'll marry me. For real this time. Not because of debt or obligation, but because we choose each other. The ring was simple, a single stone that caught the light. Melissa looked at it, at him, at the faces of people who'd become her family. Yes, obviously yes. He slid the ring on her finger and the whole room erupted. People cheered and clapped, and someone started playing music. Dae-Wang pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet, and when he set her down, his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. I love you, he said, just for her. So much it scares me sometimes. I love you too. And we're going to be happy, Dae-Wang. Really, truly happy. I know. He pressed his forehead to hers. Because we already are. The party went late into the night. At some point, Melissa found herself on the balcony, looking out at Seoul's lights, and Song-hee joined her. You did good, the older woman said. Both of you. We got lucky. No, you got brave. There's a difference. Song-hee squeezed her shoulder. I've worked for Boss for 8 years. Never saw him smile until you came along. That's not luck. That's you being exactly what he needed. He's what I needed too. I know. That's why it works. Inside, Dae-Wang was talking to Kwon Jae, both of them laughing about something. When he saw Melissa watching, he excused himself and came over, sliding an arm around her waist. Ready to go home? Always. They said their goodbyes, collected gifts and well wishes, and finally escaped to the car. The drive back to the apartment was quiet, both of them content to just exist together. When they got home, Melissa kicked off her shoes and collapsed on the couch. That was perfect, she said. It was. Dae-Wang sat beside her, pulling her feet into his lap. Thank you for saying yes. Like I could say anything else. She wiggled her fingers, watching the ring catch the light. When did you even get this? 2 months ago. Been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. And tonight was the right moment? Every moment with you is the right moment. He started massaging her feet, which should have been weird, but just felt nice. I want to take you to Atlanta, meet your grandma properly, ask her blessing even though we're already engaged. She'll love that. She's old-fashioned about some things. Good. So am I, apparently. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together. Eventually, Melissa spoke up. My debt is almost paid off. 3 more months. I know. Are you going to miss having that hold over me? She was teasing, but part of her wondered. I never thought of it as a hold. More like an excuse to keep you close until you realized you wanted to stay on your own. He met her eyes. You do want to stay, right? Even with the debt clear? Dae-Wang, I'm wearing your ring. Where else would I go? Anywhere. That's the point. You're free now. Really free. The debt, Weston. All of it. It's behind. You. Melissa sat up, moving to straddle his lap so she could look at him properly. I am free. And I choose you. Every single day I choose you. Not because I owe you, not because you saved me, but because you're kind and good and you make me laugh. Because you remember how I like my coffee, and you bought me a phone to call my grandma, and you hold my hand like you're afraid I'll float away. She cupped his face. I love you. That's the only hold you have on me, and it's the only one I need. He kissed her then, soft and slow and full of promise. When they pulled apart, his eyes were suspiciously bright again. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that choice. I know you will. She settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. That's why I chose you. 6 months later, they got married in a small ceremony at a garden in Seoul. Melissa's grandma flew in, healthy enough to travel with help, and she cried through the whole thing. Song-hee was the maid of honor. Kwon Jae stood up as Dae-Wang's best man, and the officiant was a judge who owed Dae-Wang a favor. Do you take this man? The judge started, but Melissa was already nodding. I do, absolutely I do. Dae-Wang laughed, that full, bright laugh she'd worked so hard to earn. Let him finish the question at least. Why? We both know my answer. The ceremony was perfect, simple and honest and full of joy. When they were pronounced married, when Dae-Wang kissed her in front of everyone they loved, Melissa thought about the terrified girl who'd crawled across his office floor, how she'd begged for help not knowing she'd find so much more, how the worst thing that ever happened to her had somehow led to the best thing. Mrs. Kang, Dae-Wang said against her lips. I'm keeping Clark, actually, but you can call me that if you want. Clark Kang, now you're talking. They danced, they ate, they celebrated until the sun set and the garden lit up with lanterns. Her grandma cornered Dae-Wang at one point, making him promise to take care of her grandbaby, and he'd sworn on everything he held dear that he would. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, he told her grandma. I'd die before I let anything hurt her again. See that you remember that, her grandma said, but she was smiling. Later, much later, when everyone had gone home and it was just the two of them, Melissa and Dae-Wang sat on their balcony watching the city. She was still in her wedding dress, he'd lost the ties somewhere, and they were both exhausted in the best way. We did it, Melissa said. Actually got married. Best decision I ever made. Asking me or saying yes when I crawled into your office? Both. All of it. Every choice that led to you. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm really happy, Dae-Wang. Like genuinely, completely happy. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. Me neither. He kissed the top of her head. But we get to feel it now for the rest of our lives. Forever sounds pretty good. Forever sounds perfect. They stayed there until the stars came out, making plans and promises and dreams. And if you're wondering whether they made it, whether love born from desperation can really last, they did. They absolutely did. Because sometimes the worst beginnings lead to the best endings, and sometimes crawling on your knees leads to standing tall beside someone who sees you as an equal. If this story grabbed you, there are more coming. Maybe hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment telling me what you thought, because honestly, I love hearing from you guys.